So as we face a world where climate change is making our storms bigger, scarier, less predictable, how do we protect ourselves and our coastal areas? Well, drones are a really great way to capture high-resolution geospatial imagery of our coastal zones. The zones that are incredibly important for our water catchments, our coral reefs, our fisheries, and our tourism, and in fact, just where people live. Human beings have always loved to live near water, and the coast in beautiful places like Australia is certainly no exception to that. But unfortunately, what we're finding is, unless we are able to predict a little better how large storms are going to affect our coastlines, more and more houses are going to end up going for a permanent swim. So how are drones being used around ideas of measuring coastal erosion to help us protect our assets or evacuate people from vulnerable coastal zones? Well, drones are being used immediately after events, so we're getting more of an understanding of that initial hit of how movement is happening in our coastal zones. Drones can be flown on a really frequent basis. If you have a drone that can fly, say, 10 kilometers of beach every day, you can build up a really beautiful map and model of how that beach is actually behaving under normal conditions. This can allow you to put that data into the models around storm prediction to see what would happen if the wave height was a bit higher, if the waves were a bit more frequent, if there was a change in how much precipitation, how much rain was actually coming down a river catchment at the same time, if it was high tide. People have been using drones to actually flood risk map. And what happened originally was people were using satellite data or manned aircraft data and saying, say, to house A, you're in a flood zone, therefore you can't get flood insurance or your premium is going to be very, very high. And house B, they would say, oh, you're not in a flood zone, so you can get flood insurance and your premiums are not going to be so high. When they started flying drones around, a lot of the time they realized that they thought that house A was in a flood zone. It actually wasn't. And when they thought house B was not in a flood zone, it actually was. So with more accurate data, we're able to model more, which means we are actually able to understand risk better. And if the time is not now, then when? We need to get better at understanding how our river systems and how our coastal systems are going to cope with climate change, with larger storms, with more drought and more flood. And drones can be a perfect data platform for this kind of survey.